you can go. Unless, Deb, do you want to just take attendance? Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Yael, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you.
Will you be able to turn on your video? Ah, there you go. Are you with us from, is it North Carolina? Are you with that group? Oh, you're muted.
No, Ithaca, New York.
Oh, welcome, welcome. Robin, so glad timing worked.
Yes. Nice to see you.
Robin, where are you?
Right now, literally
Yeah,
in my office in Natick.
I never see you with that background. So this is
I know. Well, if I'm on Zoom calls, I figure I might as well be at home where I can have, I don't know, like.
yeah, no, there's no judgment. I just didn't recognize the background. What happened to your arm? Your carpal tunnel?
I don't, it's such a long story. I have a tendonitis that like flares up every once in a while.
Okay.
Nice to see you. Hi, Kathy.
Hey, Robin, nice to see you. It's crazy. It's a whole more than a month ago, huh? Since
Yeah.
Florida, that's
I know, but it's on my mind.
yeah.
Good. We have a little flurry of people coming and we'll give it another couple of minutes before we really start, but so good to see some of our stalwarts and new friends as well. Good to see everybody this morning. Hi, Sandy. Haven't seen you in a while.
So
Bridget, Margie, Lori, some of you I've seen more recently. And Ahuva's coming on too. Wonderful. All right, I think, Kathy, we'll get started. So just want to say welcome to everybody this morning. So good to see everybody. Actually, the last one of these sessions was when Robin, Kathy, and I were in Florida at MTEI, so that's why I wasn't at the last one. But so happy to be hosting our colleague, Kathy Simon, who you're in for a treat if you have never studied with Kathy before, and her work is timely and important and deeply personal and moving and so many other words that I could use. I'll let it speak for itself. Those of you that are new, and it looks like Maytal, hi, and Yael, if you're new to our group, can you please put in the chat how you heard about us? We'd love to know. And as you're doing that, I will turn it over to Kathy to introduce herself and start our session.
Thank you so much. Lovely to see everyone. I was about to say good morning. I'm zooming in from Oakland, California, where it's obviously still morning, and it's great to see you. And I really appreciate your taking this hour in what I can only imagine are very, very busy days. So good to see you. You know, the workshop I'm about to do, you know, I sometimes like to say, well, I'm doing a 60-minute version of a 90-minute workshop, but the truth is, this is a 60-minute version of like a 20-year kind of workshop, which is to say, you know, I want to talk with you about some practices that are just that, they're practices. Like davening is a practice. You know, if you went to a 1-hour davening workshop, you wouldn't like get it mastered in that hour, or a 1-hour yoga class. It's like I hope to plant the seeds of some ideas that you might say, hey, I want to try this out now, but it's definitely not that like bag of tricks kind of educational workshop at all. So, and that said, I'm so thrilled to offer this stuff to influencers like you, people who can help create culture and change the norms, as the title of the talk says, because if, you know, there's so many sort of ills one can point to in our society, you know, there's so many. And to my mind, a core one is how we speak and listen to each other. And if we could change the cultures of dialogue in all the contexts where we have influence, starting, at home and in the workplace, in our workplaces, in our schools, in our other institutions, and then into the broader world of discourse, the political sphere, certainly, it would be a different world. So, here's an hour on thinking about discourse patterns, how we talk to each other, and I hope I give you, what to ponder. So all of that said, I'm going to move a little fast because, 60 minutes is really short on this. And I'm going to go to a slide screen, so I won't see your faces and stuff like that. I really invite you to interrupt me. Like, don't go like, she's on her roll. I don't want to, just go ahead, use your voice. I may or may not see the chat, but jump in. I want this to be like more responsive, like it would be if we were in person. So go for it. Okay.
And Kathy, I'll be monitoring the chat and doing my best.
Perfect. And feel free to, jump in and tell me, Marion, that there's something I should relate to. So are you seeing the screen okay there with, I know the thumbnails are there, but I get a thumbs up, Marion, on what you see. So what I'm trying to do today is to face the fact, and the title is creating relational space, creating new norms for dialogue. So one of the places I'm going to focus in terms of dialogue is the fact that we have differences of opinion with other people and looking at our options when we face that. So we're focusing more on those areas where we're trying to speak across difference. But to be honest, these skills are useful just in connecting with people, whether or not there's difference. And I hope you'll see that as well. We are going to look today more at the one-to-one level, rather than like what this looks like in a classroom or working with a group of people. But I hope you'll try to make some of those analogies, and they're definitely there, and I'll try to name some of them as well. The two main topics we're looking at, and kind of the takeaways, I'd love for you to walk away with some things to chew on regarding the choreography of conversations. And you'll know more about what I mean by that, and our potential role as facilitators of our own conversations, even if that's just with one other person. So the choreography of conversations, one of the big ideas, and then diving specifically in to listening to things that are hard for us to hear. And I know that you're all listeners, like you wouldn't have the jobs you do without having some deep skills in listening. So I'm going to try to add in, and forgive me if you're like, yeah, I know that, or this is what I already do. But I always think that this is an area where we can get even better. And we'll have a very brief small group practice, and please jump in with questions throughout. All right. So the ideas that I'm presenting are based on nonviolent communication, the sort of school of thought that Marshall Rosenberg started writing about in the 60s. So if you want to go to read more, that's sort of your first reference, is Marshall Rosenberg's book called Nonviolent Communication. That said, I don't talk about all the stuff the same way he does. And, time goes by and things change, and I have my own versions, but I do definitely want to credit him with the kind of the core of many of these ideas. And the core is that, again, we are talking about how do you face difficult communication, in particular with presence. Like, you bring your whole self, you bring your best self, and you bring what presence means mostly is I'm going to try to meet this moment and not necessarily do my habitual things. So that's the big picture of what we're at. And these skills can be used every day to connect with other people, and also if there's conflict. And I'm not going to be teaching you any, talking points. Like if a person says, X, you say Y. It's not about that. It's about how to show up in a way that, it's more Buberian. How to show up in a way that you can actually bring your whole self. That's the I, and really see that other person, the thou. And as you'd expect in a school of thought about how to communicate, there are practices connected with listening and speaking. And today we're really just going to focus much more on the listening side. But if we had more time, and then, the next workshop would be about speaking. And we all know how to listen and speak. So what are we adding here? There's a real focus in the listening on attunement. How can I listen in a way that really takes in that other human being? And on the other side, the speaking side, empowered speaking. So this is really different from, say, polite speaking or being nice. There's something here that's about standing in your full power. And, I see they're mostly people who look like they might identify as women in the room. And I especially love talking about empowerment to women, because I think we often maybe focus more on the attunement side to the other. So that, again, that would be the other workshop, this empowered speaking. But I want to make it absolutely clear that while I'm going to focus on listening today, it's part of a larger practice, which is, how do I show up as a listener? How do I show up as a speaker? And what enables me to do either of those is a level of mindfulness, that I'm aware of my regular patterns, that I recognize that I don't in this moment have to do what I always do, especially if that's not super functional or connecting, that I stay connected to my own feelings, that I stay connected to what I believe in and I want, and I'm working on seeing the other person with compassion. So this is the kind of the whole package. And today, as I say, we're focusing on listening. Another way to name the whole package is, how do we show up with curiosity and compassion for the other person, along with clarity and courage in articulating our own views and yearnings. So that's worth taking a breath around. And I'd like to encourage you in this moment to say, if you see these as kind of two poles or two sides of the scale or something, curiosity and compassion for the other person, clarity and courage about where I'm coming from, I want to ask you which you're better at. Which do you lean into? Take a moment just to think about that. And then, without asking you where you landed, I'm just curious, do you land anywhere? Raise your hand if you're like, yeah, I do know which way I tend to lean. Cool. And is there anybody who's like, yeah, no, I kind of do both. I'm, okay. Okay, great. Clarity and, curiosity and compassion, clarity and courage. Like, wow, what if we can put those all together? That's kind of what we're talking about here. Again, gosh, if we had more time, I'm so curious what you're thinking about that kind of formulation, but I'm going to not go to it right this second, and I'll take your thoughts about it in a little bit. So, in service of this notion of curiosity on the one hand, clarity and courage on the other, I'm going to suggest some new patterns for discourse. And, the most common feedback I get when I talk about this stuff is, it's not natural. And, the word natural is so interesting. But what I want to claim, I want to say, like, yes, there would be awkwardness if you try out some of the things I'm suggesting. And I just want to say, like, what doesn't feel naturally is not, what doesn't feel natural is what we weren't taught, what we haven't been practicing our whole life. So if something feels unnatural, I'm like, cool, that's okay. It's worth giving it a try. And one of the things I want to say about hard conversations, and this is just like what seems to me like a broad cultural norm, is on the one hand, we're having hard conversations all the time. On the other hand, there's some way that we don't take it for granted as a necessary part of life. And a thing that, like, of course, we would all want to be good at and skilled at. And you can see the fact that we don't take it that seriously. Like, it's not that many schools, for example, where it's just like part of what children practice is having hard conversations. They might have practice having debates, but that's a really different thing. So I just want to say, like, let us face together that hard conversations are inevitable, and it helps to view them as a part of the flow of life, like rainstorms. And I wrote that slide and I wrote that line a couple weeks ago when it was raining like crazy here in California. And, one wants to remember, like, this is not bad weather. This is part of the flow of life. And people differ, and we need to talk about our differences. And I just want to say it's kind of odd that we, even in our workplaces, our families, we treat hard conversations as if they're not going to happen, like there's an element of surprise to them, or as if something to be avoided. And I would say, like, let's face it. So again, want to take a quick temperature of the room when I say hard conversations are inevitable. I'd love to stop and talk about, but just let's get hands. Like, how many are like with me? Like, yeah, it's true. I face that. Hard conversations are inevitable, even with, people we love, and certainly with people okay. Feel free to use the chat. I guess there has been some chats that that I haven't been keeping track of, but feel free to use the chat to respond to any of this. Again, the engagement the interaction is less than I ideally would love, but I want to try to get to where we can practice. So I want to say that they're inevitable, these hard conversations, and they can come on in a variety of ways. And sometimes they come by surprise, like, oh shoot, I didn't know we were about to have this, and this person disagrees with me. That's hard. Or I hear the person say something I do not like. Maybe I find it, sexist or racist or just ill-informed, and suddenly I'm facing the possibility of a hard conversation. These are particularly hard because that element of surprise is, makes it hard, is painful and destabilizing. And sometimes it's not at all that moment of realization. Maybe it's an issue that we know is going on. We've had the disagreement for a long time, and we've argued about it a zillion times before. And more likely, if we've argued about it before, now we avoid it. So do people have both of these? Who's had these like hard conversation thing that took you by surprise? Can anybody, does that resonate? Okay, who has the hard conversation that is busy not happening because you're avoiding it? Yeah. And who has that argument that you have, kind of regularly, like, zillion time argument, right? These seem like they're familiar types. So we're thinking about the question, which is, if we're not happy with like how it's going with the avoidance or the repeated argument, what can we do? What are our choices? And I wanted to highlight that in schools, like everywhere else, just to be global, avoidance is a key strategy for dealing with potentially hard conversations. My doctoral research was actually about this. It came out later in a book called Moral Questions in the Classroom. And the big theme of that book is that moral questions are largely skirted in the classrooms that I did my research in, that we like touch on it and leave it as quick as possible because things get very hot to handle. And so I want to say, like, I am well aware that as school people, dealing with potentially hard conversations is fraught. You can get in bad trouble in a zillion different directions. So avoidance is a natural response to that. And yet, not that functional for all the reasons you would tell me. So what I want to say, whether it's by surprise or it's an argument we know is waiting to happen, when we sense a difficult conversation, we face a series of choices. And what I'm interested in looking at here is not so much what's the right answer when you face a difficult conversation, but the fact of choices, the awareness of choices. Because oftentimes people talk to me about arguments, they say, like, I didn't know what to say, or there was nothing to say, or I didn't know what to do, or I've gotten, and I would say, look, no, actually, or I told him off because that was, the only thing I could think of to say. What I'm interested in is that we have choices in these moments. And I'm not here to say what's a right choice in any moment. And those choices will really vary depending on the context and the power dynamics. You might choose to talk to a supervisor different than a supervisee, as one example. But in all the contexts, I want to say, like, there are more choices than we allow ourselves or that we have the creative energy to find. So, the rest of this talk, of course, is going to be about engaging in these conversations, because, that's what I do. That's what I teach, is how to engage. But I want to make absolutely clear that engaging in a hard conversation or a painful thing or something that maybe feels personally threatening is a choice. And there is always a choice on the table to walk away. So again, I'm going to spend the rest of the time like standing on the soapbox of, we can engage better, we can engage longer, we can hang it, that's where I'm going to be coming from. But I want to absolutely clear that sometimes the right choice is to walk away. And let's just reinforce that for a minute. Has anybody ever walked away from a conversation and thought, like, yes, thank goodness I walked away. That was the right thing to do. Good for me, healthy for me, maybe more functional for the relationship. Okay, that's a choice. I think, Delia, did you start to say something? Do you want to? Okay, so I'm going to leave this choice for now, but say it remains on the table at all times, right? If you get into a conversation and then go like, no, it would have been one to walk away from. All right. But for the rest of the time, we're like, if I choose to stay and engage this conversation, or maybe I proactively engage the conversation, then what? And I want to say, sadly, that the dominant discourse pattern when we engage culturally, when we engage difficult conversations, is some kind of, and it's a weird analogy for me because I actually love to play ping pong, but not in arguments. It's some kind of a ping pong argument where I make my point, you make your point, I make my point, until someone goes, damn it, I'm out of here. And we don't, maybe someone ends with the feeling of like, yeah, I scored my point, but not a sense of we've moved somewhere together to a deeper understanding. So, we want to look at patterns that are going to be more functional than a kind of unfriendly game of ping pong. So the question I want to ask you is like, if I don't want to have a ping pong conversation about a hard issue, but rather I want to keep the person at the table, have them hear me, maybe even persuade them of my point of view. Not to, another thing we do culturally is like, here's what I think, here's what I think. Okay, let's agree to disagree. And, there's all kinds of issues in which I can kind of agree to disagree, but there are all kinds of issues, personal and more public, where I actually want to persuade them of my point of view. I mean, I'll share, for example, that I spent a good chunk of 2018 in the California Central Valley, where I really was interested in flipping, helping to flip some of those congressional districts. I'll leave you to guess which way I hope to flip them. But I was engaging with people about whether or not it made sense to build a wall on the southern border of the United States. And I have a really strong opinion about that. And I wanted to persuade people of my point of view. And I wanted to keep them at the table, and a ping pong argument wasn't going to work. So whether it's kind of a big political issue or like, what are we having for dinner? It would be good to keep the other people at the table. All right, so the question I have for you is, now I'm talking about this big idea of communication choreography, and I want to ask you, what would you aim for when you have heard someone say something you really disagree with? What's the choreography you aim for? So I'm calling the ping pong game a kind of choreography, if that makes sense. And I want to say, like, what choreography, how would you set it up so that it's more likely to be satisfying, more likely that you'd stay at the table together, et cetera, and you'd stay connected? Whoopsie. And I'll stop the share for a minute. Take a moment. Think about this notion of conversational choreography. What would you set up? We'll be quiet for like 30 seconds and then I'll invite your voices and or your chat contributions. So who's got a thought? Feel free to use your voice. Yeah, go ahead. I need my reading glasses to see your names. Hi, Lori.
I was thinking more of being in a canoe with the other person
Mm,
on a difficult waterway.
mm. And just fill out. I grew up in St. Paul, Minnesota, so like canoe. I'm all about canoes. Tell me what the image calls forth.
You know, we don't want to capsize. We want to work together to move through the difficulty.
Mhm.
You can propel a canoe forward by yourself, but it works much easier with another person.
Mhm.
That's what.
Thank you, beautiful. And I'm also trying to think something like if the front person pulls and the other person pushes you go around in circles, right? So yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, Elle wrote, literally dancing together, listen to each other's body language. Thank you, Richie. Climbing together or hiking, we need each other. Three other metaphors that work for you, or just images. It doesn't have to be a metaphor. Kind of descriptions of what the choreography would be.
Maybe a puzzle piece?
Mm. Thank you. Spell it out, Robin, just a little bit.
I mean, I'm just thinking of a jigsaw puzzle and like how one piece fits into the other and they're different or,
Mm-hmm.
But maybe when you put them together, there's a bigger picture that can be seen.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Marion says, going deeply into a canyon. Do you want to spell that one, like flesh it out a little, Marion?
Yeah, so I was thinking the metaphor piece was about going deeper. So I was thinking, but what's a positive image of going deeper? Like to see the beauty in the canyon, to look closely at the flora and the fauna. So that I wanted to sort of pull up the positive sense of going deeper.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much. So thank you. And for me, like we've done something here. If you take away the notion of, oh, this very conversation that I'm in right now, the next one you have, or even of course, this one has a choreography. They all do. And to stop and go as you're having the conversation, what's the choreography we're using here? Is it this person does 2-step and I do 1, this person steps forward and I step back? Like, what's the choreography? There always is one. So, I like to laugh at my graphic arts abilities here and say, like, I have a very fancy graphic. Let me see what I said here. Okay. Yeah. A very fancy graphic for what I want to, suggest as a choreography. Dun, 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 dun. Is that we're going to set it up so that one person speaks and the other person listens for what really matters to the other. That's the setup. And one of the images that I thought of has been like a piano recital. That there's a kind of, especially if you think about going to a piano recital of a young person, you know, they're playing and there's an appreciative listening. You don't listen with an ear to like which what do you say? What, you know, did they hit a wrong note? That's not how you listen. You listen for the melody. You listen for what they're trying to play. There's an appreciative listening. And that's really hard when you really don't like what they're saying, you know, but that's the practice. And I, you know, a lot of people who have learned something about the importance of saying, you know, listening to the other, like we know that. And so it flows so trippingly off the tongue to say, you know, to listen for a minute and then say, I hear you, but. So I really want to, and, you know, and then give your point of view, which is kind of a slowed down, more polite ping pong. You know, someone talks, I hear you, but here's my point of view. I hear you, but here's my point of view. Slow down, polite ping pong. I'm talking about something different. And here's my other fancy graphic on it. That we're going to know at any given moment who the listener and who the speaker is. Because we're going to not do this sort of back and forth thing. We're going to actually, you know, and I like the image of the canyon for this. We're going to dig down deep into what it is that that first person wants to say and make sure they're heard well, really well, that they would go like, oh my God, yeah, thank you, you got it. And you hear that out breath, and it almost always happens. And then, of course, we do want to switch roles so that the person who spoke becomes a listener and that second person gets heard really well. And we figure out how to move forward from there. But having that motion, like we know who the listener and who the speaker is at any given moment. And then we switch is really different from like, you know, switching back and forth nonstop. All of this is not to say that the listening is a silent listening. Like that's one way to know who's speaking and who's listening is because the listener is sitting there completely silent. That's not what I'm talking about either, because as you can imagine, I'm talking about a particular kind of very active listening. So that's what I want to dig into in just a moment. But I want to underline that because there are so many other norms of conversation, choreographies of conversation, the ping pong being one, the hard hitting ping pong or the kind of polite ping pong being dominant ones, or the avoidance, because those are the more, you know, frequent fallback kind of choreographies. To make this other kind of choreography happen, you'll need to facilitate. You know, and I love saying that to a group of facilitators. So you know what facilitation looks like. It's just that we don't normally think of facilitating our own conversation, you know, with me and my partner, like, you know, but actually it needs a facilitator. And there's not one in the room like, oh, it's going to be me. And, or, you know, or one's partner, but somebody who's taking care to do this. Here's what facilitating looks like. Acknowledge the fact that we seem to be looking at this thing differently. And then name or set up the speaking and listening roles. This is what needs to be facilitated because it doesn't happen on the natural. And I'll say this 7 times during the hour, but if there's a thing you walk away from today, this would be one thing I just would love. This, to my mind, is a golden thing to acknowledge the difference. So here's what you might say in the role of facilitator. It seems like you and I are thinking about this differently. I'd like to hear more about how you are thinking about it. Then, if you're open to it, I'd like to share my perspective. Do you see what happened there?
Kathy, Kim put a question in before you put the slide up, so I don't know if the slide answered her question.
Okay.
But it says, do both parties have to go into the conversation with the intention to be listening deeply?
Yeah, thank you, Kim. So I love the question, and no, I mean, I think that hardly ever happens, or if that happens, then be a kind of different world. But I think that the people can get there, and like you took the workshop, so now this facilitation idea is on you, and you can send them to the workshop and hope that but in the meantime, if you're willing to take some leadership to say, I'd like to set this up so we each get well heard. Are you willing? And then the other person's going, okay, yeah, sure. Well, okay, now they're entering at least with a named intention to do it that way. So there's the acknowledgement. It sounds like we're thinking about this differently. I'd love to hear you. And then I'd love it if you hear me. Like nothing more fancy than that. But that, it doesn't normally happen to slow down enough to say like, oh, we're having a thing. And I just can't recommend enough. Like if you can do this tonight and somebody in your household says, I'd really love pizza for dinner. And you say, I was thinking of the broccoli and tofu stir fry. And then you go, oh, it sounds like we're thinking about this differently. Tell me more. I'd love to hear you on the pizza. And I'll talk to you about broccoli and tofu. Right? Like that you can do, and then it's like, well, pizza would be great because there won't be dishes. And Mom, I really, really like to unburden you from the dishes tonight. Right? Like you could set up this kind of conversation. I'm playing obviously, but I do mean to say that to slow down and acknowledge that we're thinking about it differently, that I'd like to hear you and I'd like to share my perspective, world changing. Like what if our Congress people spoke to each other like that? And how are they going to, if we don't teach the children? So, here's to a Congress 20 years from now where people have these skills. You'll see that this sets it up so that I'm going to be the listener first. I'd like to hear more about how you are thinking about it. It means I'm going to listen. And I wish we kind of lived, I wish it was easy to also say, like, I'd like to speak first and then I'll listen to you. But it's just true that it might make sense to listen first, because I'm going to go here first. People tend to listen better after they've been fully heard. It increases somebody's capacity to hear if they've been heard. And aside from all of that, being heard is a core human need, and we can offer this to each other. I just referenced some of my political work in the Central Valley in California, talking to people about the wall. And it was good for me, even though it was super demoralizing in a bunch of ways. It was good for me to see the humanity in people who disagreed very strongly with me. And it was good for them to be listened to. You know what I mean? Even if we didn't walk away like with a big budge in our political positions, it was like, oh, I was heard. I was heard. And people were so surprised, because we know the scripts. Build a wall, that's ridiculous. Whatever painful thing I want to say about immigrants, that's baloney. We know the scripts of those arguments. So to be able to change the scripts, I think we need a wall. A wall seems really important to you. Well, yeah, tell me more. Well, because we need a way of people getting into the country that's legal. And the only way we're going to do that is have a wall. So you really want an immigration system that is like that people are following, that has some kind of rhyme and reason to it. Yes. Oh my God, what a different conversation. Okay. And what's hard about starting to listen with someone you think you don't agree with is that you think that if I'm listening, they're going to think I agree with them. So I want to put right up front, you can say this, you can make it absolutely clear. It seems like you and I are thinking about this differently. And I teach a course with a colleague called Responding to Everyday Racism. And we teach this as a response when we hear a thing that somebody say a thing that we hear as racist. It's like not at all that I'm listening because I agree. I'm listening because you're a human being, because I want to understand more deeply where you're coming from, and also because I want to be heard ultimately, because I think we're more likely to move forward in a direction that I believe in if we hear each other. So I hope you'll take this away with you and try it out. Let me take a breath. Questions, comments about this notion of it sounds like you and I are thinking about this differently. I'd like to hear you, and then I'd like you to hear me. Anything coming up for you?
Yeah, Kathy, yeah, Elle put something in the chat a few minutes ago.
Thank you, Yael. I feel like facilitation is very related to the notion of care in general. Love that. Yeah, Yael, do you want to say more about that?
I think that was about it. It's just like, and I think it is related to what I wrote about the body language, is really paying attention and really feeling or looking, observing, feeling the other person before making a point or before stepping in. It's related to also in I think it is like a hot topic right now, the notion of care, and I think it's really related to how we listen as well. So like really caring for the other person, like deeply and radically. That's.
Thank you. Yeah, I love the word radically, because it's hard to care when people are driving you crazy, or doing things that you see as destructive or immoral. It's hard to care. Kim?
Yeah, I'm thinking about when you go into these conversations about what you hope the outcome is. Is it that you really want to gain a better understanding of the other person's perspective? Is it that you want to, and the example you gave about trying to get people to understand yours and move to action? I guess I'm wondering about when you have these interactions, and if the person is open to listening to you, then what happens in that next round? If it's not that ping pong, how do you move forward from there to a place from understanding if you want some action that comes from it?
Yeah, thank you. It's such a great question, and I want to say first, sometimes there's a sitting with the deeper understanding, and one can't, and there's not an immediate action, and I think it's the impulse to immediate action that makes us like actually fight each other, because it's like we got to get this thing done. Like, no, I'm gonna stop you. No, like, and there is something about slowing down. Like, what if we really understood each other, and sitting with that can allow some movement. And the other thing is, and this is where the slideshow moves next, but I'll try to say it in a word here, and then it's a point I really want to make sure we get to before we close, and I want to have you practice just a little. That the listening, the first level of talking is usually on the strategy level, and I'll stay just with the wall conversation. Okay, so at some level that conversation is a wall. Not a wall. Yes, a wall. We really need a wall. No. Wall's really bad idea. Wall, not wall. Wall, not wall. And trade it in, like do the dishes, don't want to do the dishes, do the dishes, don't want to, or, in the school realm, right? Like Shabbat morning school, Sunday morning school, Shabbat morning school, like it's on the strategy level. Does that make sense? And where we try to move the conversation is to the deeper yearnings and needs level. So wall, not wall. Safety, fairness. You really want safety and fairness? Yes. Or more likely, we need a wall. You're thinking it would be more fair to have a system where people just get in through designated entry points. Well, yeah. So you really care about fairness? Yes. So now we've shifted the conversation from wall, not wall, to fairness. Okay. And if we get some shared needs on the table, there are so many other strategies open up. And so this distinction between strategies, which is where most of our arguments start, and a deeper needs is key. Kim, is that speaking to you at all? So I'm gonna go there in the slideshow. I'm gonna take a minute or two with this idea. It's also, this needs idea is core to listening. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. And then I'm gonna give you time to practice a thing before we go. So the gist of the core thing is we're trying to set up a speaker and a listener. And the energy of the listening is curiosity and openness. If we had time, I'd get you to think about your own listening practices. I'm going to skip that, although I want to ask you to do that. And then a thing that I can, a value add, I think I can give you, even as skilled, experienced listeners and professionals, is this idea, which I was just talking with Kim, that what people say is an attempt to articulate underlying needs or values. So if someone says, we need to have school on Shabbat, and the other person says, no, Sunday morning makes so much more sense. Both people are talking about underlying values. And if, as the listener, you can hear those underlying values, that conversation is going to go much further than the Shabbat Sunday argument. So what are underlying needs or values? Here's a kind of list. This is not at all exhaustive. They're kind of clustered. If you look up on the web, NVC, nonviolent communication needs, you get a bunch of these lists. This one fits on the slide. But the notion is that anybody could look at this list and go like, do I want those things for myself? Totally. Do I want those for every other human being on the planet? Absolutely, would love if they had them. They're like these sense of universal human needs that we need to thrive. And the idea is whatever a person says, even a thing that we hear as ignorant or mean, that there is some underlying value there. That they're not talking about, that I can try to listen for. And this is like knowing that people say things and do things that are tragic, expressions of these underlying needs, and they don't necessarily meet the needs of that person. I'm not like trying to say like everything everybody says is okay or good or whatever, but that underneath there is probably something that they're yearning for. And I have some examples here of, things people say that are not easy to hear. And still I would claim there are some underlying needs there. So let's just play with one for a second here. Parent comes at you and says, you obviously don't really care about my child. And I want to say, whew, I wish people didn't talk that way. And I believe that there are some underlying needs there. Who can give it a guess? Yeah, please. Yeah, go ahead, Bridget.
So it could be that if there's a behavior issue, sometimes I've heard things like that, that they're worried that you don't like their kid because their kid is causing problems for you.
Right. And so what would you say the value that they're coming from is? Like, what do they want?
Well, they want their kid to be cared about.
Totally.
want
I
their
mean,
kid
that's
to
a
be
good, like,
seen.
right? That's a good starting place. It's always
Yeah.
a guess. It's always a guess what the other person went, but oh my gosh. And of course, if they had taken the empowered speaking course, they wouldn't lead with, you don't care about my child. But they haven't taken the course. So that's their sad way of saying, I desperately want to know that my child is loved and cared for in this school. And woof, you'd have an easier time hearing that, and it would be a different conversation. But they don't say that. They say, you don't care about my child. And the magic of the ears, the listening to the needs is, okay, you don't care about my child. They need something. They need something. You really want your child to be well cared for? Yes. That's the listening for the needs thing. Okay. So, and that's the thing that I think that nonviolent communication really offers in a deep way that doesn't get offered in all, in many of the other like communication models where you have to hear about I statements and all kinds of stuff. But this piece of whatever BS a person says to you, like a mean, non-skillful thing, you're really not pulling your weight on the admin team. Not skillful in my mind. And still, one can listen for those underlying needs. All right. So in terms of like attuned listening practices, I'm going to jump to a list here. Whoopsie. With more time, I'd go more deeply into all of these, but the thing that I think that is, when I speak to skilled professionals, they do most of these things. And there's more to say about all of them, but guessing an underlying value or what that person is really yearning for is so powerful. It helps people feel seen. So we need a wall on the Mexican border. You really want to feel safer? Yes. It builds a bridge immediately and no cost to me. Actually, it's like seeing a human being with some compassion. You do not care about my child. You really want your child to be held here with a lot of care. Yes. That's that kind of listening, the reflective of like, and it's not just a reflection, because just a reflection would be, you don't care about my child. You don't think I care about your child. Doesn't go somewhere. So this need can really take it. So I want to ask you, we have just a very brief time to practice, but this is going to work. The whole prompt here is going to be, what is it like you? Mary's going to put you in a group of 2 or 3 if it has to be. The prompt is going to be, what is it like to be you right now? And let's see, I lost my ability to put that in chat. I'll put it in chat in just a second. The listener is not going to sit silently for 3 minutes, but is going to do really active listening like you know how to do, with a particular emphasis on guessing an underlying value or need. So, and we're not going to, this is not a conflict situation. Okay. So what is it like to be you right now? This is a week ago, but I'll just say, like, what if I said, like, it's good to be me right now in a lot of ways, and I'm a little tense because my kid is backpacking alone in Patagonia. You want a sense of safety? Yeah. Okay, that was a needs guess. Or underlying, what am I yearning for? Got it? Okay, so you're gonna practice, at the very least, you're gonna get a nice like 6-minute opportunity to connect with a colleague. Marion will put you in the groups right away. You're gonna, let's call it 2.5 minutes. You'll time yourself, so we'll have a chance to come back and say hello, goodbye. And the prompt is right there in the chat. What is it like you to be? What is it like to be you right now? One listens, one speaks, and then you switch 2.5 minutes on each side. Clear enough? You can do this. See you soon. Marion, you got them? All right,
Yep.
bye. See you soon. Great. Thank you. Sorry for the quick timing there, but
Okay, I knew that I was I wasn't 100% sure if I was doing 2s or 3s, whatever, but
no,
I,
totally. And we forgot to talk about it before the, I'm sorry, I
it.
didn't say it before, but
And I
thank you
was-
for that.
like, I wasn't 100% sure of some of the people who were not off camera, if they really were here, but
Totally.
we'll see,
Good. They can pop back if they don't have somebody.
obviously.
Yeah,
So,
totally. Good.
I set it for 6 minutes with like the third, actually I put a 10-second like
Oh,
thing.
perfect. They'll just pop back. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, so it'll be right at the hour and we'll say goodbye.
Yep, yep.
That's
Good.
that's a quick 60 minutes.
Oh, I think
Yeah.
look at the chat though. I think, people get it. And I think very, it's provocative and new for people, which is wonderful. That's the idea.
Mhm. Oh, I like what Sandy said. Yeah, prioritize the long-term relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to pull that out, but you were kind of getting there, but yes.
Thank you. Yeah, neat. Okay, well, hopefully it is provocative and people always enjoy this. They're always surprised, like actually where you can get in 3 minutes,
Mhm.
by just saying like, okay, you're gonna listen to me for 3 minutes. You
Yeah.
can get to surprisingly kind of connected, close places that you don't expect. So
Yeah. And I had tried to intentionally not put people with people they knew, but that too, obviously not 100%. So
yeah, well, it all works actually.
Yeah.
Because listening is so good. So good. Being heard is so good, I guess, is the thing. Yeah. So what's it like to be you right now?
what's it like to be me right now? Feeling out of control and overwhelmed. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, just too much going on, and I want the world to slow down.
Yeah, wanting like a little bit of peace or rest or spaciousness.
Yeah, not peace or rest, because I think that's part of my problem is that I take the peace and rest and then, snap to it and realize, oh my God, I still have so much to do. So I think just a better sense of balance and what's the word? Like I get routine. That might be part of what I'm lacking right this minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be in a rhythm that feels good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you, what's it like to be you right now?
Well, I have to say, I guess one thing that comes up is like so grateful for the sunshine. And it's a weird feeling because I spend so much time like hoping for the rain. I guess I'm like very connected to the sense of tenuousness of the natural world. And yeah, a little off kilter, I think, because of the intensity of the rains and the fragility, just the fragility of our world. Yeah, that's a piece of it. Super happy to be teaching this stuff. Grateful for the opportunity, even, it feels, I guess there's a tad of frustration of it feeling, too brief and hard to know what people walk away with, but.
Is there, the care for the world, both the physical world, like, the unknown of the rains and all of that, but also the human world of the uncertainty of like, when you teach, do people take it to heart?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, uncertainty maybe is a good, captures a piece of it all. Yeah, and grateful for the work. Like, I get to do this and get paid. Like, that's crazy.
Ditto. Well, that's I think part of for me, it's also the like, I get paid, I have to do this when I also have to write 3 proposals, which I don't have time to write. But of course, I also, right, I feel so present with, it's wonderful to be with you and to hear you and to, just be present for these people. Like it's, giving them an opportunity. So,
Is this a group, is this like regulars or?
so some of them are regulars. Well, so I also, I have my regular Boston people. We meet once a week. So that's Robin's there, Kim, Bridget, Lori. I'm trying to think who else is here today. But then there's like a Hoover who comes to pretty much everything we do. Oh, Sandy's in our Boston group, just looking. And Richie's a usual in this group, but I'm having whatever. And then there's these new people, like they're all these people, Rebecca, Yael, MaTaRoT, I think they came together from a school where one of our alumni is the director.
Oh, neat.
Yeah.
So I know we're right at the top of the hour. I don't know if they're going to have to leave. So is it, how's the timer on the?
Well, it says, I'm going to close now, which means.
Close them and then we'll be back in 10 seconds and we'll just say goodbye. Do you have any?
Yeah, I just want to tell them when the next thing is.
And I'll say one word.
Yeah.
And they-
Kathy, I need to run to a staff meeting. It was so great to see you. Thank
Really
you.
great to see you,
Bye,
Robin.
Mary.
Take care. Yeah, sorry to
Thanks
go
for
over.
coming. Thanks for coming.
Welcome back, friends. I hope that was meaningful and fun and connecting. And we'll just say hello, goodbye. Really, really a pleasure to to work with you. And hope I'll run into you again. And Marion will tell you about the next session.
Okay, so thank you all for being here today. I hope it was valuable for you and opening of your heart and giving you some new skills to think about. I just want to bring to your attention our next session, which is on February 28th at noon also. And we're going to be privileged to study with Gina Tsitsik, one of our alumna. And she's going to be talking about a topic that really flows from this, bringing spirituality into your classrooms, bringing chesed and loving kindness into the classroom. So very much in line with the work that we've started this morning with Kathy, and just in line with what we all aspire to make the world a better place. So I wish you all a wonderful month. If the next time you'll come to us is on February 28th, and some of you I'll see even sooner than that. So have a wonderful week and a wonderful rest of the month, and see you all soon. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks. Great to see you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. All right,
Thank you, Marion.
thank
Yeah,
you. I have to run to a 1 o'clock.
Take care. All right. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.